Good evening. I'm Rabbi Jeffrey Saks, the director of WebYeshiva and Atid, and thank you to all of you around the world who are joining us, the WebYeshiva community online. It means a lot to us, particularly to have so many of you in far-flung places. I know that no matter where you are, whether you're here, there are people at this very moment here in Israel who are in their safe rooms. Particularly the folks up north who at this very moment seem to be under focused threat from the north and are huddling down in their safe rooms, and those of us that are a little further away from points of danger, but yet are never far away from thoughts of danger. I know many of us have children, friends, loved ones who are right now in, let's just be plain, in grave peril, and we're all aware of the grave peril that's facing the entirety of Medinat Yisrael and Knesset Yisrael, the Jewish state and the Jewish people, and these are unprecedented times. So we thought, there's a lot happening right now in the news. I have one window open looking at all of you and another on my phone. So we're going to try to keep it brief with a few words of reflection, of chizuk, of strengthening ourselves if we're able, and some words of Torah. And if, unfortunately, as it seems, the situation is not going to be coming to a speedy resolution, despite our fervent prayers, this might be something that we'll do from time to time to gather the WebYeshiva community to litchazek together. Our Rosh Yeshiva, Rabbi Brovender, is here, and particularly because he's been struggling a little bit with some health issues. So we're happy to see him looking hearty, despite those personal things and despite what we know are the weight of the current situation on him. So Rabbi Brovender, let us know, how are you doing during all this? What thoughts are you thinking, and what thoughts do you have for us that can help us understand what the Jewish people and nation are going through?
Thank you, Rabbi Saks. When they asked me to say a few words describing my feelings at this time, I didn't think I could say no. But on the other hand, I was unable to conjure up a reasonable sense of what is happening. We're confronted by real evil, something which in most of my life I thought didn't exist. I always thought that people would see their way to reasonableness, something that made sense. And here I hear on the news that thousands of young people were slaughtered by an ongoing mob. I mean, when could that happen? When could that happen to us? I mean, not just that it happened, but that it was evil. Even the mitzvah of Amalek, wiping out the Amalekites. I mean, why are we supposed to wipe them out? I mean, can't we re-educate them? Can't we insist that they straighten out? But the Torah says no. There it says there's evil, or you could recognize it. But there's a kind of evil that cannot be tempered. It cannot be changed. There's just no way for it to become what it should be. Amalek, the Torah teaches us, cannot be rectified, cannot be changed, cannot be improved. And even though in the last thousands of years, we've kind of lost touch with Amalek, and we've lost touch with the fact that there's evil that had to be undone, changed, uprooted. All of that is necessary in order to make a more stable and coherent kind of work. So I say to you, I have nothing to say, but I put up with this idea, that there's evil, not just in the world, but in my backyard. And that somehow I have to come to grips with it. That's the story of my first day in this war. Afterwards, there was a call up. A lot of soldiers. You know, these things don't always go exactly as we would like them to. But you know that people my age who have children in the army and grandchildren in the army and great-grandchildren in the army. Imagine, they're all lining up. They're all joining forces. They're all going to do what it is that we have to do, So the second thing I see, which to me indicates that there could be light in the darkness, is the call up. The fact that everybody joins in. The fact that we don't hear about people who are not showing up. So for me, the hope is only that. The hope is that the light will somehow overwhelm the darkness, that the good will become a necessary component of our lives, and that we'll be able somehow to absorb what happened and to see our way clear to a new day and a better world. Thank you.
Rabbi Brovender, you've been in the country a long time. I think most of us online either live abroad or are olim of one length or another. But you and Miriam, you came on Aliyah in 1965. We're going on nearing 60 years ago, 59 years ago. You've seen a lot of things in this country. Some good, some better, some worse. Naturally, when this broke out on Shabbat, on Simchat Torah, people's minds immediately went back to the Yom Kippur War, which had occurred exactly 50 years and a day, had broken out exactly 50 years and a day according to the Gregorian calendar, and of course, the connection between Yom Kippur and Simchat Torah. You have very distinct memories of that experience, and on different occasions you've spoken about it. I remember in the Yeshiva you used to speak about the 6-Day War, the Yom Kippur War. How does this, what we're going through now, how do you see it differently? In what ways do you look back to those previous experiences and can mine certain insights and lessons that would be useful to us today? And in what ways is this completely categorically different?
I thought in the past that we would be able, with a little bit of effort, to resolve the conflict with Gaza, for example. What happened now was, I really don't think that you can resolve a conflict with evil. And therefore, as difficult as it seems, and as there's nothing like this that ever happened, there's nothing that we underwent, and we in Israel have underwent a lot. None of it is something that we can think clearly about. Again, I say, I have no answers, only pain. I wish you all well.
I'll turn now to our friend Rabbi Gidon Rothstein, who, if Rabbi Brovender has been here for a very long time, Rabbi Rothstein is quite literally a very, very fresh Ole Chadash, having only moved to the country, although he's been a frequent, long-time visitor. He is now an Israeli amongst us, living in Yerushalayim. Rabbi Rothstein, among other things, teaches our Daf Yomi shir, and I know many of you participate in that, either live or by archives, and are learning with him every day on WebYeshiva. But as somebody that brings a very fresh pair of eyes to the Israeli experience, as someone whose Tudat Zehut is still shiny, how are you? How has this experience been for you? What have you been experiencing?
So the truth is, I've been experiencing emotionally and then intellectually. Emotionally, I have to say, for me, thank God, and I fear to say it, but for me personally, there hasn't been the suffering so many others have suffered. And I feel terrible that others are suffering so much when, I spent the morning in a miklat davening, Simchat Torah davening. And other than that, thank God. And I don't want to change that. But meanwhile, around me are people who are losing people who are spending many more hours in their rooms and in their miklat. So there's some of that here. I spoke to somebody today who was a high school student in 73. And I asked him, I said, what was it like being here in 73? He said it was so different because it was a war. Meaning it was off at the borders. It was soldiers. If you won, you won. If you lost, but you didn't feel it. But this is like people and the idea and the thought of so many families. And I'm beginning to hear about people I know who are losing children and grandchildren and great nephews who have lost.
I doubt there's a single one amongst us who is any further than 1 degree of separation from loss at this point.
I think that's right. But I think, right, correct. Yeah, it's a very sad thing. As an intellectual matter, it happens to be that last Thursday night. So last Thursday night was before anything. None of us knew what was coming. But I was talking
to someone earlier about something that happened on Friday night. At Hakafot on Friday night, I said, you remember 3 days and a million years ago.
Right. Well said. So I was talking about, I said, we never study Vizot HaBracha really, because we sing on Simchat Torah. There's no day for it. So I said, I want to just think about one verse from Vizot HaBracha from the last parsha in the Torah. The verse says, Vayivishurun melech b'tasef rashei am yachad shivtei Yisrael, which is understood to mean that the Jewish people will have a king, meaning a king with a capital K, when the Rashei Am get together, Yachad Shivtei Yisrael, when all the tribes of Israel come together. And I'll tell you what I said about it in a second. I want to speak about Achdut, because I think that unity is a word that we bandy about too easily when it's vital, but it's more complicated, more difficult than we might think. But as I'm about to launch into this whole topic, somebody raised their hand. Literally, this happened last Thursday, and said, "What do you mean? Every time there's a war, we have great Achdut, we have great unity." And I said, "Yes, but do we want to have to wait for a war to reach Achdut, to reach unity?" So it's a sad thing. We now, thank God, have great unity of the Jewish people. And we're being reminded, and it's not to be, I don't belittle it at all, because it would be easy to have a nation that wouldn't even find unity. But a nation, again, that is remembered, and is remembered that the fights we've been having pale in comparison to what we have in common. And to keep alive and to hope that we remember that Achdut is like, in a different context, a different tragedy. Yitzhak Rabin once said, you don't make peace with friends, you make peace with bitter enemies. But Achdut, unity, is something that we try to develop with our closest people with whom we disagree greatly. We think back to that verse, Yachad Shiftei Yisrael, there were 12 tribes in the Jewish people. If you count the Levim and Kohanim, 13 or 14, and they didn't see the world the same way at all. They had their own views of the world. And the pasuk of the verse is telling us that when we get to the nation of Israel the way it's supposed to be, is when we can remember that as much as our family members irritate us, maybe not your family members, I'm sorry if you have good families, as much as my family members irritate me.
Certainly being locked together in a safe room.
Exactly.
Can apply pressures to certain points.
Yes, yeah, but they're family. And I'm not, I've heard people, it's so tempting to start talking about who was wrong this way and who was wrong that way. And I firmly avoid any of that. It's not the time. But as we're rebuilding our Achdut, and as I hope, we're learning to keep that unity for the future. It's a function of remembering that you see the world completely wrong and you're completely crazy. And I hate what you think about the world. And you're my brother, and you're my sister, and you're my cousin, and we have to live together, and we have to enjoy each other, even as we struggle to find the middle ground where we can work together and be together. So to me, as I watch people who've already suffered the loss and are finding it out, who are reeling from the loss, who have continued issues that are going on, and we have a dark road ahead of us. I know personally people on the front lines now who may be being sent into Gaza, which is not going to be a simple thing at all. As we sit with trepidation, and as I pray to Hashem, I literally pray to Hashem for various kinds of miracles. My most recent miracle idea that I pray to Hashem for is, I think about the story of Sisera in the book of Shoftim, and where they wake up and they're all dead, right? That's what it says. And I imagine to myself, what if a virus swept through Gaza, killing only terrorists? Hashem could do that. It would be such a great thing. So I pray for it. I don't know if it's going to happen, but I pray for all of us that as we move forward through what looks like it's going to be a long and protracted and difficult time, that we remember that this Achdut that we have now, if it's only imposed by war, we're failing. And that we find a way to remember for ourselves that the Achdut, not the Achdut, the easy Achdut of, oh, I love you so much, you're so great. The harder Achdut of, you may be irritating, you may think things that I think are extremely wrong, and nonetheless, you're my brother, you're my sister, and we have to find ways to live together.
But Rabbi Rothstein, I would never accuse you of burying the lead, but it's your words, I think, particularly strike home and strike the heart, because this crisis comes at a moment of particular lack of Achdut, at least here in Israel, because of the recent political tribulations. And
I totally agree. I was only trying to be non-political, but
I'm not
to their credit,
either, but
to their credit, I think people on both sides of the equation have said that. Have said, look how silly it was that we're fighting over those stupid things.
Right. And you think of this minyan that took place in Tel Aviv, and the terrible strife that caused just a couple of days ago. It seems like ancient history. And then today you see that one of the very beautiful things I saw today, non-kosher restaurants. I don't know if the proprietors were out there protesting. Non-kosher restaurants koshering their kitchens for a day. They're not going kosher. They're not being choser b'tshuva, right? Chabad didn't get to them, but they're koshering their kitchen for a day or two or a week, so they can prepare meals that will be sent to soldiers, so the soldiers will be allowed to eat. It's incredible. It's a beautiful thing. And on the other hand, I had to go into Yerushalayim to help out with certain things today, and I saw young Jungelite, as they're called, Haredi youth who's let's be clear, their fathers and brothers are not serving in the army. They're not in the same peril that my son and others people's sons are in. They're out on the street giving out Israeli flags and bumper stickers and collecting donations on behalf of Chayalim. So it comes in from all directions. So that's what. Let me just ask you one other question before we move on. You of course teach the Daf Yomi. To be a teacher of Daf Yomi, to be a student of Daf Yomi, and Kal V'chomer to be a teacher of Daf Yomi requires a certain degree of OCD. Right? You have to be a little obsessive compulsive to keep up with it, to be constantly preparing, to be always ready to teach. It's a tremendous commitment, which you execute, of course, with great passion and responsibility. And of course, we believe, as you said, prayer and Talmud Torah and good deeds are another way. It's another front on which we're able to mount this struggle, alongside, of course, the pshuto shel mikra of charbi u'kashti, right? With sword and with bow, with weapons and with war. Prayer is also a way. Limud Torah study for those that are unable to be involved in these efforts in other ways. Learn Torah with us on WebYeshiva or wherever you are. And certainly for those of you that are overseas, you can help out financially. There's great need. If you're unable to contribute yourself, you're able to help raise money and to spread the true news and not the fake news. But Torah study is of course an important zchut that we have to add to our thing. But how do you do that? How do you keep focused on what you have to do with Torah study when the reality of what we're doing is such a huge distraction? I sat down this morning to try to do some garden variety work, the type of work I would have been doing had the world not come unraveled. Every 3 minutes you have to check the headlines. Every 30 seconds you look to see the flash that's coming across the phone. How do you discipline yourself to do that work of prayer and Torah study that's so important? Keshela atzmo, and in order to add to our collective merits.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I think the answer for me is that I've just developed a routine and I have this list in my head and I can't let myself go until I've done it. And those other things, there comes a point where I have to say to myself, sorry, I say in the house a lot, it's time to go to learn the daf because the daf isn't going to learn itself. So I got to learn the daf because the daf isn't going to learn itself. And so I think it's a question of that. It's a question of, I think there are things, no matter how distracted you are, you brush your teeth in the morning, right? No matter how distracted you are, eventually you get around to taking a shower. I think that we have to just start setting, the Rambam talks about the verse that's and he talks about you have to have time set up in the morning and the evening for Torah study. It has to just become a part of our routine in the sense of, I can't live my day without this. I recently had an injury and I had to stretch or whatever it was. I had to do some exercise, which, it doesn't fit well with my schedule. All of a sudden, the next 20 minutes of my day, I had to make sure it happened because otherwise I was hurting all over the place. I think we have to get to a point where we think of tefillah and of Talmud Torah and Torah study in those ways. Rabbi Akiva was known to have said that story about the fish in water, right? Torah is our water and we are the fish. And we may not know it, but we're suffocating without it. So we have to just make sure that we find some Torah study and put it in our schedule and make it irrevocably part of our schedule. That's the best I can come up with.
Well, thank you, Rabbi Rothstein, and to all of our teachers for giving the WebYeshiva community the daily dose of oxygen, of air to breathe. We'll turn now to your colleague on the Daf Yomi team, Rabbanit Dr. Tamara Spitz. Tamara, you, like I, are here in Gush Etzion. And if I'm sorry if I'm not mistaken, you also have sons that are no doubt been called up. So just let us know they are, as best of our knowledge, they're okay and they're safe and they're.
Yes. I have 4 boys who have been called up to the army. I have two that are in on the border, meaning one up north and one down south, and two that are in the middle of the country. Baruch Hashem, three of them I've been in touch with. One of them is up north. I haven't heard from him in a few days, but it was expected. So Be'ezrat Hashem, they are all safe. But these are very, very challenging times. Very challenging.
But so tell us, share with us some of the thoughts that have been going through your head in the 10 years that have passed since this past Shabbat.
Okay. I want to share, I think, two different things. I want to share some Torah that has given me personally comfort. And I want to share an experience that I had today that I also hope will shed some light and give some people some comfort. I do have to be honest, like others have said this evening, that when I was asked to speak in this incredible forum, I have to say that it was, for me, it was very daunting, trying to think of how I can strengthen others when I'm just trying to strengthen myself and my family and my students around me. But I think that when one tries to channel that positive energy, I think it not only helps the people you're talking to, but it helps yourself as well. So I want to share two ideas from the Netivot Shalom on this week's Parsha. This week we're going to be reading Parshat Breshit. We did, as you said, 10 years ago on Shabbat, we did begin reading Breshit, and we read about the creation of the world. And I think very starkly we read different verses differently based on what we're experiencing. And if you look at the Torah, it starts with telling us that in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. And the second verse says, and the earth, the haaretz haita tohu vavohu, right? The earth is chaos, and there is choshech, there's darkness, and the divine spirit, ruach Elokim, mirachefet al pnei hamayim, is right? The divine presence is kind of hovering over the water, and the third verse says, right, Vayomer Elokim, and God said, Yihi or, there should be light, Vayihi or, and there was light. And I think in these days, these words are very stark. This idea of chaos being around us and looking for light. And the Netivot Shalom tells us, it's interesting that the Torah starts with this idea that God created the heavens and the earth. Why is that important? And he says that the world, but also mankind, has two parts to us. The heavenly parts, the shamayim, which is the spiritual side of us, our souls, and the land, the aretz, the physical parts of us. And the aretz, right, the physical world around us, is in chaos, is tohu vavohu. And when that happens, it's important to recognize that God created light. Like Vayomer Elokim Vayhi Or, that there needs to be light. There's a divine light in this world, and it's important for us to look for it. And I think that that's something that gives me great hope and inspiration, is finding those moments of light. I think that they can be in different forms for different people. For some people, it's about prayer. And I've had tens, if not hundreds of people texting me that we're praying for you, we're praying for your children. And that's something that is, that supports us on so many levels. There's Torah, as you mentioned earlier. There's learning Torah, which is related. The Chazal say that it is like light. The Torah gives us light and inspires us. And finally, I think it's about the acts of kindness. I think it could be from sending a heart emoji to your friend, to this. I'll just share this afternoon. About 300 residents of the South arrived to a neighboring community in Gush Etzion, in Kfar Etzion, and they put out a request for people to come and help. First of all, they requested donations of clothing, and they asked people to come and help. And I went this afternoon to help organize clothing, from babies' clothing to adult clothing. I went to go buy socks and underwear for these people, and it really is such a sense of strength to see, first of all, the generosity of people from all over the world who are subsidizing these projects, and the volunteers who come. I was working alongside 12-year-olds who are folding clothing, to grandmothers and grandfathers who are giving out whatever they could to the people around us. So I really feel that this is a time of unity, as you've mentioned, of light, and it's important. I think Rabbi Saks mentioned checking the news every 2 seconds. I'll say for me, I can't do it. I check the news when I can, but it's also important to kind of turn it off for a little bit and focus on the things that give you strength and the things that inspire you. So those are my thoughts.
Well, as a mother of multiple sons serving in the Army, we wish you the ability to focus on anything that will get you through each and every moment. And together with my sons, your sons, all of our sons and daughters, and all of the Dinat Israel, we're all davening for a better time. So that's Rabbanit Dr. Tamara Spitz, who teaches our daf Shavui once a week. She summarizes both going horizontally and also going vertically, deep dive in what's been happening in the Daf Yomi that week, and you can join that to add more merits of Torah study. But we're going to now turn to distant, far off Toronto, to our friend Rabbi Daniel Korobkin. Here he is. Rabbi Korobkin does a variety of things. He teaches the Mor Nevuchim for us on WebYeshiva. He writes a weekly Parsha column, and he is our Canadian correspondent, as it were. Look, as Daniel, as hard as this was for all of us, in a very different way, I can only imagine what it must have been like to be in your shoes, leading a very large North American community. I presume that news of what was happening here in Israel reached you by the time you woke up on Saturday morning, and you had to lead your congregation at the Bayit, which has multiple minyanim, and hundreds and hundreds of people must have been passing through the building on Simchat Torah. What was that like? How did you rise to that task, to be the pastor of that very confused flock? We're just going to unmute you. There you go.
Okay, thank you. First, just want to say, can you hear me now?
Yep.
Yeah, just wanted to say that I am exceedingly humbled to be on this call. My wife and I have children in Israel and grandchildren, but the fact that we're not there with you physically makes us feel extremely inadequate to be able to contribute to this conversation. And I think that that's what a lot of Jews in Chutz La'aretz are experiencing. We want to be there with you, and we want to be on the front lines as well. We know that we can't, but we are doing whatever is humanly possible to be there to support you. As far as what life was like, first of all, I found out Shabbat morning the same time that most of you did, simply because my next door neighbor and former president of our shul got a phone call 4 a.m. On Shabbat morning from his son, who was called up to active duty. So actually, I'm sorry, who was serving in the army. He's got two sons. One is serving in the army, and one is a reservist who was supposed to get married next week, and that wedding is postponed. So he came to pick me up for the Hashkama minyan, one of the many minyanim at the Bayit on Shmini Atzeret, and just told me what's going on, because he had to answer the phone by getting, knowing that his son would never call him on Shabbat unless it was an emergency.
Yeah.
So he was able to get the lowdown. We announced it in shul, and there was a tremendous amount of confusion and of fear about what was going on. And so we tried our best to keep up a good exterior and to give people chizuk, but until we really found out what was going on, it was quite harrowing. And the police came and tried to offer us additional reassurances, and so that's where we are. And since then, I can tell you that whatever is humanly possible for us to do from a distance, we are trying our best. I know in the Toronto Jewish community, there have been kinusim for tefillot every single night since then in various communities, usually together. At the Bayit, we've been davening every single night with multiple Batei Knesset joining us. There was Monday night a huge gathering of about 15,000 people at a square in the center of town with major leaders and politicians to show solidarity with Israel. And you have to know that Canada is not like the United States. Canada has as far as the proportion of between Muslims and Jews, there's at least 5 times as many Muslims in Canada as there are Jews, and that proportion is becoming more and more disparate as time goes on and as Canada opens its borders to more immigrants. So the fact that Canada still stands with Israel should not be taken lightly, and we're trying our best to push forward.
But this Shabbat, you're going to have to get up in the pulpit, going to have to address your congregation. And again, like I said, Bayit it's a mega shul. With a week's added distance, what's your message going to be? What are you guiding and counseling and shepherding your balabatim towards? What's the challenge, the charge that you're giving them, aside from obviously support Israel and contribute and all of those things?
Yeah, well, that's a good question, and maybe I'll try some material out on this crowd, and you'll let me know how it works.
Even in a normal week, I shouldn't presume a rabbi has his drusha ready by Wednesday.
It's times like this where a rabbi has to pray for siyata dishmaya, for heavenly aid, to know the right words and to make sure that he is sensitive on the one hand and emotive and connecting with his kihila and providing words of inspiration. So, I'm looking at the first parsha of the Torah, and it's a bit depressing because the very opening chapters of humankind starts with murder and starts with bloodshed. And that seems to be the fate of mankind, as it were, that we are doomed, that we are consigned to fall and to descend into evil. But there are points of inspiration as well. But the one pasuk that I was focusing on is when God turns to Cain and he says to him, "Me asita, what did you do? Kol demei achicha tzoakim elai min ha'adama." That the bloods of your brother are crying out to me from the soil. The blood-drenched soil is crying out to me, Hashem says. That God never forgets the blood that is soaked into the soil, especially into the holy soil of Eretz Yisrael. The Talmud says that it doesn't say dam achicha, it says demei achicha, the bloods in the plural of your brother. So one of the lessons that our sages take from the Talmud Yerushalmi and Sanhedrin, is that kol hame'abed nefesh achat, that if you spill the life of even one person, ma'alin alav ki'ilu ibed olam maleh, it's as if you destroyed an entire world because of that person's potential descendants have also been lost. But conversely, kol hamekayem nefesh achat, that if you save the life of even one person, which is what our sons and daughters are doing right now, it is as if you saved an entire world. That because every person is an olam maleh, and it's very difficult for anyone to be comforted by the loss of a Rahmana litzlan, a child, a parent, a sibling, or even a friend. Everyone is a mourner in Klal Yisrael today, but every single life that has been lost was a holy korban. That was a pikadon that was given. Their soul was given for safekeeping in this world, and we're all souls placed in this world for temporary safekeeping. Somehow, we don't read about it in the parasha. The Torah doesn't tell us how Adam Harishon was able to be comforted over the loss of his son Hevel, but somehow he was able to commence building the world, and we will as well. We will continue building. We will continue to be strong despite the tremendous pain that we're in. So that's one idea. The other thought that I had about Cain and Hevel was that according to the Midrash, the reason why they got into an altercation in the first place is because they tried to split the world between themselves. They saw themselves as custodians of the entire planet. And Cain said, I'll take all the real estate. And Hevel said, I'll take all of the metaltalin, I'll take all of the chattel and all of the movable items. And they couldn't get along. Cain could never be satisfied with owning only half the things in the world. And we see that human nature is that no matter how much a person has, he can't be happy if he perceives that his neighbor has more. And that's always been the source of hatred towards the Jewish people. And it can never end until one of us is gone from this world, and it's not going to be the Jewish people. The Jewish people are an Am Nitzchi, we are an eternal nation. And so we have the duty, we have the responsibility to completely put an end to this rivalry. And then the last thing I wanted to reflect upon, and again, I'm always happy to take the feedback, is that to emphasize that your brothers and sisters in Chutz La'aretz are with you, Am Yisrael, are with you, Achenu. We just, besides the tefillot that we've been doing every night, just last night, you could find, if you went to the local Walmart or the local drug mart, you would find hundreds and hundreds of Jews, because we were told in just a matter of hours, there was a chartered plane that was going to be taking hundreds and hundreds of duffel bags of toiletries and clothing to Israel to provide for the Chayalim and just to provide humanitarian aid. And literally thousands of Jews came to both the Bayit, our shul, and to another drop-off further south in Toronto. And hundreds and hundreds of duffel bags were loaded onto a plane last night. The fact is that when we look at the story of creation, what we're looking at is a story of division. God creates one unity, and then the whole story of the Bria, the Sheshet Yimei Bereshit, is God just dividing and dividing and dividing. Well, one thing that was never divided was Am Yisrael. Ata echad v'shimcha echad, u'miki amcha Yisrael goy echad ba'aretz, who was like your nation Israel, who are one people in the lands, just like you are unitary, God, the Jewish people are unitary. We did over Sukkot something called the Simchat Beit HaShoeva, the water drawing, and our sages tell us that the reason why we poured water on the Mizbeach is because ever since God created a firmament to divide between the upper waters and the lower waters are constantly striving to reconnect. There is a drive within those things that have been divided to come back together. And Klal Yisrael has been divided over these last several months. And there is now a drawing closer that we are all feeling together, sort of to like this gravitational magnetic force that is pulling all of us back together. We are with you, the Jews of the diaspora. We are with you in your pain. We are with you in your strength. We hear all of the cries. We hear all of the encouraging words of strength, and we are with you.
I thank all of you that have joined us from all over the world particularly those of you here with us in Israel, our tefillot together, joined by those tefillot of our friends and brothers and sisters abroad, that we should all be safe, that the Jewish people should be safe, that the Jewish state should be safe and secure, and we should move on from this trauma. I mean, even if God should send a solution right now, and we wouldn't add even one more fatality to the body count, we're still talking about an event of epically tragic proportion. There have already been more than twice as many Jewish souls lost as the entire Six-Day War put together. It's unimaginable. It's just unimaginable. And we thank you, Rabbi Brovender and Rabbi Korobkin, and Rabbi Rothstein, and Rabbanit Spitz, for your words of Torah and Chizuk. And again, everybody should do what they can to help friends, loved ones, those of you abroad, to help those of us that are here, those of you that are abroad, to help keep the strong support for Israel in your communities and in your nations. And one of the ways to do this, of course, is through fighting. And we hold the hands of those that are on the line. And one way to do this is to support those that are fighting, and those that have the means should do so. And one way to do this is, of course, to pray, to daven. It's a Jewish resource. It's a Jewish weapon. And another thing to do, of course, is to study Torah. And wherever you're studying Torah, God bless you. Web Yeshiva, because we are a virtual yeshiva, we can keep our doors open as we did during Corona. We will during this episode, and we have a new Zman that's starting, a new semester that's starting. And visit us at WebYeshiva.org, and we hope that we'll be able to keep all of our regular scheduled programming up and running throughout all of this, God willing. So join us. If you're already one of our regular students, sign up for an extra year. They're free. Take it, learn it live and interactive, learn it through the archives, go back through our archives, commit yourself to studying something that interests you that's there. And I'll tell you a secret, even if you're doing an archived course from long ago, the teacher is always willing and happy to hear from you with your questions as you go through the material at your own pace, and do this in the merit of Shalom al Yisrael. Thank you all very much. And we hope to hear from you and see you again soon.